This serene and picturesque valley near the town of Boxley in northwest Arkansas is referred to as historic Boxley Valley. We decided to find out just what is so historic about this valley where the Buffalo River Trail begins.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of history, and it ranges everything from prehistoric Indian times through pioneer times to modern day times. Some of the families that live here, they've lived here for generations and generations. These names came here in the 1850s, and their descendants are still here today farming and logging and doing a lot of the things that, that their descendants did. This area is really a time capsule of Ozark life. And it's such an isolated area, even though it's close to a lot of places, northwest Arkansas, central Arkansas, it's still kind of an isolated area. And that was even the way it was back then in the Civil War times. This area just didn't see the impact of the Civil War quite like other areas of the country did. Although there were skirmishes here, and there's actually a story that says that the families who lived in the northern end of the valley were actually Union sympathizers, and the families who lived in the southern end were for the South. So it eventually made it here. Again, a couple of little skirmishes over Saltpeter Caves. There were a couple of them located near where we're standing right now.
They were making gunpowder.
Making gunpowder, and the gunpowder was actually being made for the Confederates. So the Union Army would come in and do some attacks, and they'd shut them down, but then over a few months they'd get back at it, and they'd be producing saltpeter again.
There's not much left of the old homesteads here, such as the Whiteley homestead.
Not much left of it. Unfortunately, some arsonists burned that down a few years back, but the Whiteley Edgman homestead is one of many homesteads that if you're hiking in this area, and even in some cases you can drive up to, when you're out on the Buffalo River Trail, one of the most fascinating things that you can do is come across perhaps an Indian bluff shelter, or remnants of cabins like this, or an actual cabin or old barn itself. I mean, some of these things go back to the 1850s, the late 1800s, 1920s. There's a barn just upriver of us here that was built back in the 1930s. Just a beautiful time capsule again of Ozark mountain life.
Joining us on our hike at the other trailhead of the Buffalo River Trail at Steel Creek near Ponca, along with Rhonda Mills, is photographer Chuck Harrelson with the Arkansas Department of Parks and Tourism, who will give us some photography tips later in the show. The Buffalo River Trail, or BRT, is a relatively new trail, and much of it is still under construction. One of the highlights in taking the trail from the Steel Creek campground is enjoying Steel Creek itself. You'll also have to cross Steel Creek to get up to the first overlook on the trail.
Well, Steel Creek was named for George and Nancy Steele, who settled this area around 1848. They raised 11 children down here, Chuck, at the bottom of the bluff where Steel Creek comes into the Buffalo, 9 of which were born and raised right there. So, several people have lived up and down this section of river over the years, but the scariest thing that happened was back just before the Park Service established the river as a national treasure, there was a ranch here actually that had plans to develop a golf course, condominiums, about 250. From what I've read, and we would have had an airstrip and a lot of other things going on here that would have turned this entirely, the fabric of this landscape entirely a different direction. So we're real thankful that wiser heads prevailed and we were able to salvage this beautiful area and turn it into America's first national river.
The Buffalo National River was also the cornerstone for the state's environmental movement.
And that's right, because you know, if you think about the other rivers in Arkansas, the Corps of Engineers, you know, a viable entity, but at the same time, you know, the White River was already had been dammed several times, and so the Buffalo was just another on the list. So somehow a lot of folks woke up to the reality that, you know, we need to save this because that's what this state is about. I mean, that's why it's the natural state. And, you know, I would argue with anyone that this is one of the most beautiful places in the entire Midwest. And it would have been a shame to see that change.
Now, you have an interesting story about the lifestyle here, particularly one individual that you know, and you had asked him about being raised in the area and reared up, and his thoughts about that. You got to share that.
Well, we were out here riding together one time, and he actually grew up around the corner here down on the river. And I asked him, I said, you know, and this is a gentleman who's in his late 50s. I said, you know, when you were raised here, did you really comprehend and appreciate where you were? And he very honestly said, you know, Rhonda, he said, I really don't think we did. What we saw was an opportunity to make a living, and it was a very hard living. You know, he was raised in a 2-room cabin with a family of 6, okay? And they logged, they farmed, and as you look out here and you see what it's like, I mean, that was a tough way to survive. And these are very tough people. Now, what's great is today, he's able to come out and ride his mule and enjoy it, and he will say, this is a fabulous place. But when I was being raised and when we were working hard, we didn't really think about the fantastic place that we lived in.
On any hike, Rhonda says it's not so much going the distance, but enjoying what's along the way.
People have a tendency, and myself included, we have a tendency to become very fixated on destination as opposed to things that happen along the way, the little treasures along the way. And if someone is coming here to hike, the best advice I can give them is don't get so focused on how far you're going. You know, take time to talk to somebody who's been there, you know, come in, see us. Let's talk about, you know, what you're interested in, what you'd like to see, because distance is really not what you're here to do. You're here to see the little home places along the way, the foundations, the chimneys that are standing. Going up Sneed Creek, for example, is a marvel because of all the limestone slides along the way that the little creek follows. And so don't get excited so much about how far you're going. Get excited about what you're going to do on either side along the way. That may only be 10 miles worth of trail, but it'll be an outstanding 10 miles worth of trail.
10 miles is plenty enough for me. Of course, enjoying a sunset in the Buffalo National River region is a must.